Officials in New York and Massachusetts are hoping to bring better connectivity between Albany and Boston.
After decades, a new major rail transformation is now underway between Boston and Albany. This long-anticipated project signals a renewed commitment to regional connection. Backed by federal momentum under the Trump administration and carried forward with bipartisan support, the initiative is now gaining speed. Will this new train finally deliver the reliability and efficiency the Northeast Corridor has long needed? And how will it shape the daily lives of those residents? Let's take a closer look at a project that's about to redefine expectations from state to state in this episode of Great Train Speed. Hi there. If you're interested in rail projects in the United States, our channel is for you. As of now, the only train offering the service from Boston to Albany is the Lakeshore Limited, but it takes at least 5 hours to reach the destination. The Boston-Albany Corridor, formerly known as part of the full build of East-West Rail, is a long-term intercity rail initiative. Initially envisioned as a robust service with up to 8 daily round trips powered by diesel locomotives, the project has since seen its operational scope scaled back. In April 2024, the director of East-West Rail announced a significant revision. Only 3 daily round trips between Boston and Albany would be offered, with no official explanation given for the reduction. Despite this change, the 2045 target for full build completion of the whole project remains in place, and the service is expected to operate at a maximum speed of 80 miles per hour. In a period marked by widespread cutbacks and delays in passenger rail investment, particularly under the Trump administration, the progress of the East-West Rail project stands out. While numerous proposed rail corridors, including the New York to Scranton extension and the Second Pennsylvania line, were stalled or left in indefinite review, the Boston to Albany corridor quietly advanced. Against the odds, it secured a $3.5 million federal award from the Department of Transportation to fund a formal study plan, officially moving the project into Step 2 of the Corridor Identification and Development CID program. This development is especially notable given the restrictive funding environment at the time, where many similar initiatives saw their momentum halted. That the East-West Rail project not only remained on the table, but actively progressed signals a rare endorsement. While other routes await clarity, the Boston-Albany corridor is cautiously but definitively moving forward. So, what exactly is this project? Why is it so important for this area? The Boston and Albany corridor, part of the East-West Rail initiative, has a history spanning nearly 2 centuries. Rail service began in the 1830s with the Boston and Worcester Railroad and the Western Railroad, which connected Boston to the New York State line by 1841. These lines merged into the Boston and Albany Railroad in 1870, and passenger service peaked in the early 1900s, but declined after the 1968 Penn Central merger and the creation of Amtrak in 1971. Local commuter service continued east of Framingham under the MBTA, while limited intercity service was restored by Amtrak's Lakeshore Limited in 1975. Ownership changes, from Conrail to CSX, then state acquisition of key segments by MBTA in Massachusetts, set the stage for renewed interest. Since the 1990s, federal and state studies, growing public support, and coordinated planning have revived the project. By the early 2000s, the East-West Rail project showed signs of revival. Massachusetts and New York pursued federal funding for a high-speed rail study in 1991, and by 2004, Congress renewed support for expanding the New England high-speed rail corridor, including the East-West link through Springfield. State control grew as MBTA and Massachusetts acquired key sections, culminating in full ownership of the Worcester-Boston segment from CSX in 2012. Renewed public interest and advocacy kept momentum alive through 2021. With the Boston and Albany route now the preferred alignment and initial federal funding secured through the Corridor Identification and Development Program, the project has evolved into a modern, actively planned initiative rooted in decades of effort. In recent years, the Boston-Albany Corridor project has gained significant momentum through increased funding and accelerated planning efforts. In 2022, Massachusetts leveraged CSX's acquisition of Pan Am Railways to secure commitments for service improvements mandated by the Surface Transportation Board. Planning for East-West Rail was divided into 2 phases. Phase 1 focusing on inland route restoration and Springfield track upgrades, and Phase 2 targeting full Boston-Albany service. On April 26, 2022, former Governor Baker endorsed a clear path forward, officially greenlighting the project. Later that year, MassDOT, Amtrak, and CSX jointly applied for $108 million to fund corridor upgrades between Springfield and Worcester. This grant was awarded in September 2023, with track work expected to begin by spring 2027. Continuing the progress, MassDOT selected consultants in 2023 to develop the East-West Rail Service Development Plan, advancing detailed planning. By December 2023, the corridor was accepted into the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor Identification Program, a critical multi-step process for launching new intercity rail services. MassDOT secured $500,000 to scope the service development plan for East-West rail planning and design in the fiscal year 2025 budget. And now, with $3.5 million awarded, official authorization to proceed with the second phase of the CID program is underway. This advancement has the potential to bring numerous advantages to the region, some of which may be difficult to quantify. How will people respond to this development? Will its benefits outweigh the challenges during the construction? Drop a 1 if you agree, or 0 if you're not sure yet. The expansion of the Boston-Albany rail corridor promises a range of benefits that extend beyond improved transportation. One of the most immediate advantages is the potential to decrease highway congestion. By offering a reliable rail alternative, the project could significantly reduce vehicle miles traveled, VMT, on heavily trafficked routes such as Interstate 90. According to analysis by Trains in the Valley, East-West Rail has the potential to remove thousands of car trips daily, easing pressure on highways and cutting emissions caused by idling and stop-and-go traffic. Despite the clear benefits the Boston-Albany rail project offers, it faces lots of substantial and complex obstacles that threaten to slow or even derail its progress. Some voices express frustration and doubt, pointing to financial challenges as a significant barrier. Concerns about funding for new equipment, crews, and necessary track upgrades are common, especially amid skepticism about the state's ability to adequately support even existing services like the MBTA. There's also puzzlement over the lengthy timeline, with some questioning why reinstating just a few additional daily trips would take 5 to 10 years, given that the inland route remains regularly used by both Amtrak and freight trains. There might be various factors behind these inquiries. Capacity constraints east of Worcester pose a serious bottleneck. The MBTA already struggles to maintain reliable commuter rail service to Worcester, and expanding passenger trains is made far more difficult by the fact that Massachusetts does not own the rail line between Pittsfield and Worcester. That section is controlled by CSX, a freight operator whose primary focus is moving goods rather than passengers. Negotiating increased passenger service on this shared track requires overcoming significant operational and logistical challenges. Passenger and freight trains must be carefully scheduled to avoid conflicts, as double tracking, passing sidings, upgraded signaling, and modern dispatch systems are costly and time-consuming to implement. Political and financial uncertainties compound these operational difficulties. The current federal administration has shown potential hostility toward infrastructure projects initiated during the Biden era, raising the risk of funding cuts or delays. Mass Streets blog has highlighted this precarious situation, citing examples like the recent U.S. House move to rescind $3.1 billion in grant funding, including a critical $335 million pledge for rebuilding the I-90 corridor in Boston's Allston neighborhood. Such funding uncertainties create a precarious environment for the Boston-Albany rail expansion, making it vulnerable to shifts in political priorities and budgetary constraints. Together, these operational, ownership, and political challenges form a formidable set of hurdles that the project must overcome to realize its transformative potential. South Dakota is seriously thinking of having Amtrak. After over half a century off Amtrak's radar, South Dakota is rallying for a passenger rail comeback. Last month, the State House passed Resolution 6008, throwing its weight behind new Amtrak routes to crisscross the state. This bold bipartisan step envisions 2 long-distance lines, promising enhanced connectivity and economic opportunity. But what will it take to turn this ambitious plan into reality, and could it mark a turning point for the future of U.S. intercity rail? Let's find out in today's episode. South Dakota is one of the only few states in the U.S. never to have Amtrak service, a result of economics, geography, and timing. The state's last passenger train stopped running in 1969, just before Amtrak's launch in 1971. Smaller routes once served Sioux Falls, Rapid City, and Edgemont, while a transcontinental line passed through Aberdeen. However, by the mid-20th century, passenger rail was unsustainable, losing out to highways, planes, and buses. With no viable rail lines to incorporate, Amtrak bypassed South Dakota entirely, leaving the state without passenger trains for over half a century. Now, after years of exclusion, South Dakota made the latest list from the Federal Railway Administration. 2 proposed routes through South Dakota are included in the FRA report, with the most notable being the Denver to Minneapolis-St. Paul. While the other proposed route is Phoenix to Minneapolis-St. Paul, will pass some stops in South Dakota, including Sioux Falls, Sioux City, Omaha, and Kansas City, which we can explore in more detail in other episodes. The Denver to Minneapolis-St. Paul's proposed route would span approximately 1,143 miles and take around 26 hours to complete in either direction. The passenger would pass through Fort Collins, Cheyenne, Rapid City, Pierre, Sioux Falls, and then reach Minneapolis. Trains would depart from Denver at midday and arrive in St. Paul by early afternoon. The return journey would see departures from St. Paul in the early evening, with the train arriving back in Denver later that night. Compared to existing travel options, this route is expected to provide an estimated 4.5-hour improvement in travel time. The route would include 20 stations, stopping in both major cities and smaller communities, with Rapid City and Sioux Falls among the key locations expected to benefit from new rail service. Notably, 2 existing stations along the route would be reactivated or expanded to accommodate new service. According to the FRA's study, one of the most significant benefits of the project is equity and accessibility, particularly in areas with limited mobility options. It serves approximately 1.74 million people, including a significant rural population of 410,000. Among them, around 40,000 individuals live in areas of persistent poverty, while 27,000 are classified as transportation disadvantaged, meaning they lack reliable access to other forms of transit. Another 32,000 residents in the corridor face health disadvantages, making access to medical centers and essential services more difficult. Additionally, the route would directly serve 10,000 people living on tribal lands, bringing long overdue rail service to historically overlooked populations. Beyond benefiting individuals, the proposed rail service would enhance accessibility to key institutions along the corridor. The study highlights that the route would provide improved connectivity to 5 major medical centers and 24 higher education institutions, making travel easier for patients, students, and faculty. Additionally, it would serve 9 military installations, ensuring better mobility for service members and their families. Another key aspect of the plan is the restoration of 100 miles of previously discontinued long-distance rail routes, helping to reconnect regions that lost train service in past decades. This not only restores critical transportation links, but also supports local economies by encouraging regional travel and tourism. In addition, the study estimates that this corridor could also bring substantial economic, employment, and safety benefits to the region. In particular, the construction of the route could create over 100,000 jobs, supporting earnings of approximately $6 billion to $7.9 billion. Beyond construction, the long-term operation of the rail service is expected to support 1,000 to 1,400 permanent jobs annually, generating an estimated $52 million to $74 million in wages each year. The study also suggests that the new rail corridor could help improve roadway safety by shifting a significant portion of vehicle travel to rail. An estimated 11 million vehicle miles per year would be transferred to the rail network, reducing traffic congestion and wear on highways and preventing roadway crashes annually. South Dakota lawmakers have demonstrated strong bipartisan support for expanding Amtrak service. House Concurrent Resolution 6008, aimed at signaling support for new Amtrak routes, sailed through the House Transportation Committee unanimously before securing approval in the full House on February 19, 2025, with 49 yeas and 21 nays. A companion measure also cleared the Senate Transportation Committee with a 6-0 vote on February 26th, raising hopes for connectivity in a state off Amtrak's grid for its entire history. The resolution urged South Dakota's federal delegation and the Trump administration to champion the effort, with Representative Tim Goodwin, the resolution's sponsor, expressing optimism. Goodwin framed the opportunity as transformative, likening it to the creation of the interstate highway system and warning that missing out could leave South Dakota at a disadvantage. However, this project hit the first wall on March 3, 2025, when the South Dakota Senate rejected the resolution in a tight 18-17 vote. Despite its earlier successes, opposition, fueled by concerns over funding, as voiced by Senator John Carley, halted the measure's progress. While the resolution's defeat doesn't kill the dream of passenger rail entirely, it casts doubt on near-term progress and emphasizes the challenges of turning this support into concrete action. Moreover, the project doesn't have a good and convincing rating from the FRA study's ranking. It would require the greatest expense in terms of infrastructure work necessary to launch the service, more than $5 billion, because of the lack of Class 4 track needed for passenger operation. Besides the financial challenges, transportation experts and critics also express skepticism about the feasibility and efficiency of bringing passenger rail service to the state. South Dakota faces significant hurdles as a potential Amtrak destination due to its sparse population and lack of direct rail connections to major hubs. Critics argue that the state's main rail lines are slow, winding, and essentially dead ends in the west, making it one of the least advantageous locations for a long-distance Amtrak route. Some transportation analysts suggest that without a direct connection to rail networks in eastern Wyoming leading to Montana, the only realistic Amtrak presence would be a limited service to Sioux Falls, if anything at all. Skeptics also point out that South Dakota's infrastructure is already well suited for travel, making passenger rail a less compelling alternative. High-speed highways, with speed limits of up to 75 miles per hour, offer an efficient way to cross the state, and parking is widely available. Additionally, many South Dakotans are accustomed to long road trips, often driving 12 or more hours to neighboring states. Sioux Falls, the state's largest city, also has a well-managed airport with competitive air travel options, further diminishing the need for rail service. Kelly Beck, Director of Finance and Management for the state DOT, also raised concerns, pointing out that South Dakota is one of only 3 states without passenger rail service. While this absence is often seen as a drawback, she noted that it allows the state to receive special transportation circumstance grants from the federal government, which have been used to support freight rail and other transportation projects. Although recent FRA maps include a possible Amtrak route through South Dakota for the first time, transportation officials caution that securing funding and prioritization remains a significant challenge. Amtrak's Airo train has finally made some remarkable progress. For years, Amtrak has brought high hope in modernizing rail travel across the U.S. and presents a sense of pride in American transportation for more convenient travel. With its state-of-the-art technology, Airo will be an important part of the train system across the country. So what happened recently? And are there any preparations from Amtrak for this new endeavor? Let's find out in today's episode of Great Train Speed.
Amtrak Airo will transform the travel experience. This is the future.
On May 30th, Amtrak revealed more images of the next-generation train, the Airo. Built by Siemens Mobility, this American-made fleet is expected to enter service in 2026, marking a pivotal milestone in Amtrak's long-term modernization strategy. The Airo will first appear along the Northeast Corridor and gradually expand to other key lines starting in 2027. These include the Empire Service, Downeaster, Hartford Line, and Amtrak Cascades, connecting major cities across the Northeast, Northwest, and beyond. Each Amtrak Airo train will be operated as a single train set, rather than individual rail cars. These train sets will replace aging rolling stock that has been in operation for nearly half a century, offering a much-needed upgrade in speed, efficiency, and passenger experience. The Airo project represents a $7.3 billion investment. Originally, Amtrak ordered 73 train sets, but an additional 10 units have since been added, bringing the confirmed order to 83. There is also potential to expand the fleet by up to 130 more trains as national demand grows. Early reactions from passengers to these images reflect both excitement and cautious optimism. Many riders are praising the train's sleek, modern design, calling it one of the better-looking additions to Amtrak's fleet in recent years. A particularly popular feature is Airo's ability to travel seamlessly between electrified and non-electrified routes, a change expected to cut transfer times in Washington, D.C., and improve through service between multiple cities across the U.S. Supporters have also expressed hopes for improved onboard comfort, especially when it comes to seating. While travelers are enthusiastic about modern upgrades, they've made it clear they want seats that match or surpass the comfort of older Amfleet or Horizon cars, unlike those found on the newer Venture cars, which drew criticism. Some are also calling for better sleeper cabins and higher quality dining options. Other passengers have voiced concerns about visibility, asking Amtrak to avoid window advertisements that can obstruct scenic views. Meanwhile, a few questions remain about Airo's full electric capabilities, especially regarding the type of locomotives it will use under catenary power. Overall, the response is hopeful. Passengers are engaged, opinionated, and eager to see a new era of American train travel take shape. With a bright future ahead, the new train has received strong support from the government, but are there any specific preparations from Amtrak for Amtrak Airo? As part of preparations for the arrival of the new Airo train sets, Amtrak has begun major upgrades at one of its most critical West Coast facilities. In Seattle's historic King Street Yard, construction crews have broken ground on a new maintenance complex designed to meet the needs of a modern rail fleet.
Less about trains as point A to point B and more about the experience between point A and point B.
Set to open in 2026, the overall project investment is nearly $300 million, funded by the IIJA, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This nearly 100,000 square foot facility will serve as a key support center for the upcoming Amtrak Airo trains, beginning with their deployment on the Amtrak Cascades route. The site will also provide essential services for long-distance trains operating out of Seattle, making it one of the most important rail yards in the Pacific Northwest. At the heart of this project is a shift toward more advanced, efficient maintenance operations. The new complex will include a two-bay maintenance and inspection facility alongside a dedicated service and cleaning bay. Together, these additions will enable faster turnaround times, more precise inspections, and improved onboard service reliability. Once fully completed in 2027, the upgraded King Street Yard will reflect a broader nationwide effort to modernize not just trains, but the infrastructure that keeps them running. It's a behind-the-scenes investment, less visible to passengers, yet vital to ensuring that Amtrak's next generation of trains runs smoothly, safely, and sustainably. Even though the project on Airo got huge support from both the government and residents, it might have faced some hurdles. So what exactly are these hurdles? Amtrak's new Airo train is getting a lot of support from both the government and everyday riders. People are excited, but there are still some concerns. That's mostly because the company building the Airo, Siemens, also made some of Amtrak's previous trains that didn't go smoothly. Back in early 2022, Siemens-built ALC-42's locomotives had issues on the Empire Builder route. A few of them broke down not long after launch and had to be towed by older trains just to get out of Chicago. That left some folks wondering if the new Airo can really hold up in real-world service. Since then, Amtrak says things have gotten better. During the winter of 2023 to 2024, the newer locomotives broke down a lot less, about 4 times less than the winter before. A bunch of the early issues have already been fixed. That said, some new problems popped up. In late 2023, cold weather messed with the pipes that carry oil inside the train's transformer. When that happened, the train struggled to power things like lights, heat, or even move properly. Amtrak fixed it by swapping out the bad pipes, and Siemens updated the design so all future locomotives will have the improved version. But winter 2024 brought more trouble. Some trains had issues with the system that deals with diesel exhaust fluid, and even the emergency engine shutoff buttons. Those buttons are on the outside of the train, and snow or ice could accidentally hit them and shut the engine off, right in the middle of freezing weather. Amtrak and Siemens are now working on fixes to prevent these kinds of problems from happening again. While these issues show that building modern trains isn't easy, they also show that Amtrak is learning and making changes. The goal is to make sure the new Airo trains are not just fast and modern, but also reliable in all kinds of weather. What do you think about this new train? Will it play a major role in the future of the rail industry? Type 1 if you agree, or 0 if you think otherwise. One of the coolest things about the Airo train is how it can run on different types of power depending on where it's going. It's built to handle all kinds of routes, whether there are electric wires overhead or not. If the tracks have electric lines, Airo can hit speeds up to 125 miles per hour. If not, it switches over to diesel and still moves fast, up to 110 miles per hour. And for shorter routes or places that need quieter, cleaner operation, it can run on battery power at around 60 miles per hour. This mix-and-match power system means Airo can go just about anywhere without needing big changes to the tracks. Plus, it uses less fuel and puts out fewer emissions, which lines up with what a lot of countries, like those in Europe and Asia, are already doing with their newer trains. The Amtrak Airo is built with today's passengers in mind. It's got a modern look, more space inside, big windows to enjoy the view, and larger restrooms. It's also designed to be easier for everyone to use, with things like wheelchair lifts and a cafe car that's set up to be more accessible. You'll find comfy seats, USB ports, Wi-Fi, and better food options. They even added color-coded cabins to help people find their way around more easily. Whether you're in business class or a regular seat, the idea is to make the ride smoother and more enjoyable. When it comes to the environment, the Airo is a big improvement. It's not fully electric yet, but it's a lot cleaner than older trains. Amtrak says it puts out up to 90% fewer emissions when running on diesel. That's a solid move toward their goal of hitting net zero emissions by 2045. The train also uses fuel-saving tech and a lighter design to boost efficiency. On average, taking an Airo instead of driving the same distance by car could cut your carbon footprint in half. Metra, the regional rail service around Chicago, is taking a different route from Amtrak. They're getting ready to roll out new battery-powered trains that don't produce any emissions from the tailpipe. Since they run fully on batteries, they help cut down on air pollution, especially important in crowded cities where clean air is a big deal. Amtrak's Airo trains take a more flexible approach. They're designed to switch between electric and diesel power, which means they can run on tracks with or without overhead wires. It's a practical way for Amtrak to go greener, even on routes that aren't fully electrified yet. In the broader picture, both Metra and Amtrak are trying to solve the same problem: cutting down emissions from train travel. Whether it's all electric or a smart mix of power sources, both are steps toward making rail travel cleaner and more sustainable.
Moline to Chicago train may soon be one big step closer to making it to the station.
Amtrak is finally coming back to restore service to the Quad Cities, especially with, you may be surprised, Trump support. Under the President Trump administration, several Amtrak projects faced funding cuts. However, this particular initiative was an exception. So, what exactly happened? And why did this project receive such special attention? How is the funding and timeline currently? Let's find out in today's episode of Great Train Speed. Recently, the Department of Transportation released its much-anticipated funding award list for a range of infrastructure projects, many of which had been held up or placed under extended review during the Trump administration. This period of uncertainty left numerous initiatives waiting for clarity on their financial backing. However, amidst this challenging funding landscape, the Amtrak expansion project to the Quad Cities notably secured a $500,000 award to develop a study plan, the crucial first step in the Corridor Identification and Development (CID) program. This allocation stands out as a positive sign of trust and support from the Trump administration. Unlike many other rail projects, such as the New York to Scranton extension and the Second Pennsylvania line, which have faced frozen or delayed funding under the Trump administration, the Amtrak expansion to the Quad Cities has managed to secure crucial financial support. While these other projects remain stalled amid ongoing reviews and uncertainty, the Quad Cities initiative received a $500,000 grant to advance its study plan as part of the Corridor Identification and Development program. This contrast highlights the unique position of the Quad Cities project, demonstrating a level of federal confidence and prioritization not extended to several comparable rail expansions during this period. The ability of the Quad Cities project to move forward, despite broader funding challenges, emphasizes its strategic significance and the administration's willingness to invest in its development. For the communities that have long awaited improved passenger rail service, this funding breakthrough not only provides momentum, but also highlights the project's special status and perceived value at the federal level during a time when many others struggled to move forward. So, why was this project given so much focus? The Amtrak Quad Cities project enjoys strong community and political support. Local advocates emphasize the service's potential to reduce travel burdens for students, workers, and visitors, especially by eliminating the need to drive to Galesburg, currently the nearest Amtrak station. At a transportation committee meeting in 2019 held at Bradley University, the Director of Government Affairs for the Quad Cities Chamber reaffirmed the region's commitment to passenger rail. He described it as a smart investment with the potential to transform the local economy, noting, "It's a great way to travel to Chicago, and for Chicagoans to travel to the Quad Cities. We rely on Chicago's global reach for business, tourism, and quality of life." Research from Visit Quad Cities supports this vision, revealing that 60% of area tourists come from the Chicagoland area. Once operational, the rail service is projected to generate $25 million annually in economic impact and create between 550 to 825 permanent jobs in the region. Moline Mayor also mentioned that the community stands to gain in several ways from this rail, such as providing a convenient commuting option for workers, helping students travel to and from college campuses, and offering a means for visitors to easily arrive and depart. We know our communities are better off when visitors can come and go in multiple ways to experience all that the Quad Cities have to offer. We know we are better off when we are not isolated from economic activity in the rest of the state or this region of the country. And we need to keep making sure that isolation does not become our reality, she said. On the political front, support for the Amtrak to Quad Cities project remains strong and bipartisan, reflecting a sustained commitment across party lines to advance regional passenger rail. Their efforts build on earlier high-profile backing from leaders such as former President Barack Obama, who helped elevate the project's national visibility during its initial phases with his stimulus fund. Most recently, the Department of Transportation's decision under the Trump administration to award $500,000 for a study plan marks a significant milestone, demonstrating continued federal confidence and bipartisan cooperation despite broader uncertainties affecting many rail initiatives. This cross-party support emphasizes the shared recognition of the project's strategic importance and its potential benefits for the Quad Cities region and beyond. So what efforts have stakeholders made to turn the restoration into reality? But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification so you never miss the latest updates and stories from our channel. For over a decade, the proposal to restore Amtrak passenger rail service from Chicago to Moline, Illinois, has captured the attention of residents, local leaders, and transportation advocates. The project promises enhanced regional connectivity, economic development, and a practical alternative to the 55-minute drive to the nearest Amtrak station in Galesburg. The proposed 162-mile route includes 8 stops, with Geneseo confirmed as one of the station locations. Momentum for restoring service began building in 2008 when U.S. senators from Illinois and Iowa, including Dick Durbin and Barack Obama, called on Amtrak to evaluate a return to the Quad Cities. In 2010, a $230 million federal grant was announced to fund the Chicago-Moline route, targeting a 2015 launch. A year later, $177 million in federal funding was allocated specifically for the project. However, progress stalled in 2015 when Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner froze spending and placed the project under review. To preserve the federal investment, the Illinois Department of Transportation released matching funds in 2016, allowing the project to resume. In 2017, construction of Moline's new station, known as the Q, was completed, generating early optimism. In 2019, Illinois passed a major transportation bill backed by Governor J.B. Pritzker, which allocated an additional $225 million to the effort. By 2020, Amtrak projected service would begin in fiscal year 2024, with an expected 165,600 riders in its first year. In 2023, application to the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor Identification and Development Program was approved, securing $500,000 for further planning and placing the route among national priorities for future federal funding. However, as of 2025, the service remains inactive, though the project is now expected to be completed and operational by 2027. But this timeline, however, remains uncertain. So, what are the reasons for the delay? A major obstacle to launching Amtrak service to the Quad Cities is the unresolved dispute between the Iowa Interstate Railroad, IAIS, and the Illinois Department of Transportation. The key point of contention lies in the 50-mile stretch of track between Wyanett and Moline, which is controlled by IAIS. Without access to this segment and the necessary infrastructure upgrades, the project cannot move forward. At the center of these concerns is the deteriorating Rock River Bridge near Moline. A relic from the Rock Island Railroad era, the bridge is in severe disrepair. Reconstructing the bridge and upgrading the entire Wyanett-Moline corridor is estimated to cost over $800 million. IAIS has been reluctant to proceed without a clearly defined funding plan that would cover these improvements, safeguard existing freight operations, and shield the company from added liability. Fortunately, in 2024, IAIS was awarded nearly $29.9 million through the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Grant Program. This funding will support the replacement of key structures, including the Rock River Bridge and Atkinson Bridge in Illinois. IAIS has also committed to providing a 20% non-federal match, an encouraging sign that the railroad is willing to invest directly in long-needed infrastructure upgrades that had previously stalled negotiations. However, one major challenge remains: finalizing operating agreements between Amtrak and IAIS regarding scheduling and track priority. Since IAIS primarily handles freight traffic, Amtrak trains could still face frequent delays unless firm agreements are reached to ensure passenger service receives sufficient access and priority on shared corridors. After years of delays, Amtrak service to the Quad Cities is finally moving forward. Thanks to strong bipartisan support and key federal funding extensions, the project has new momentum. Will this be a turning point for the region? Comment 1 if you agree and 0 if you don't. Colorado is famous for its breathtaking landscapes, from the rugged Rocky Mountains to the striking red rocks of Garden of the Gods. It's a paradise for outdoor lovers, with year-round opportunities for skiing, hiking, biking, and rafting. Cities like Denver and Boulder offer a unique mix of city life and easy access to nature, while mountain towns like Aspen and Telluride attract visitors with their scenic charm. But as the state's population grows, getting around has become more of a challenge. About 5 million people currently live on the Front Range. In the next 30 years, an additional 3 million people are expected to live and commute along this corridor. That's where the Front Range Passenger Rail Project comes in, a new project aimed at boosting rail in the large region. So what's the deal with this new rail line? What makes it such a big deal for Colorado, and how is it supposed to fix the growing traffic and packed commutes along the Front Range? Let's break it all down in today's episode of Great Train Speed. Back in the 1800s, Colorado was changing fast. After gold was found near Pikes Peak in 1858, people from all over rushed in, hoping to strike it rich. Small camps turned into towns almost overnight. To keep things moving, people, tools, food, and gold, railroads started popping up across the state. Lines like the Denver and Rio Grande and Colorado Central helped connect these remote mountain towns to the rest of the country. The trains made a huge difference, turning Colorado from a tough-to-reach frontier into a growing state. By the time it officially became a state in 1876, the railroad had already helped shape its future. And time flies. Fast forward to today, and Colorado is still on the move. With over 6 million residents, the state is seeing rapid population and economic growth, especially along the Front Range, bringing challenges. Traffic is heavy, budgets are tight, and urban transit is struggling to keep up. With that in mind, Colorado has expanded its rail options. Trains like the California Zephyr, Southwest Chief, and the seasonal Winter Park Express provide some service, but they aren't enough to meet rising demand and also to improve connectivity along the heavily traveled I-25 corridor and ease traffic congestion.
As you know, our state is getting ready to celebrate our 150th anniversary, and won't Front Range Passenger Rail be a key part of really celebrating who we are?
Colorado is actively pushing forward with the Front Range Passenger Rail project. The state of Colorado is moving forward with a bold vision to launch passenger rail service between Denver and Fort Collins by 2029, with plans to eventually extend the line south to Pueblo. This proposed rail line would reconnect major cities along the Front Range and mark a return of regional rail. Amtrak included the Front Range route in its 2035 expansion vision in 2021. If the plan materialized, the full trip from Fort Collins to Pueblo would be over 3 hours. As population and traffic pressures continue to rise, passenger trains are once again being viewed as a critical piece of Colorado's future mobility network. But this isn't the first attempt to bring rail service to the region. Back in July 2016, the Regional Transportation District (RTD) launched the B Line, a 6.2-mile commuter rail segment between Denver's Union Station and Westminster. The line operates on a single electrified track and runs every 60 minutes from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. Despite its modern infrastructure, the B Line has struggled to attract ridership. In 2024, the route recorded only 145,000 trips, down from 157,000 in 2023. Learning from these early efforts, the Colorado Department of Transportation is now developing a comprehensive service development plan for the Front Range passenger rail. As of 2023, the focus is on the core corridor running from Pueblo to Fort Collins, laying the groundwork for what could become one of the most significant rail investments in the western U.S. But while the vision for the Front Range passenger rail is ambitious, turning it into reality has proven to be far more complicated. So what's standing in the way of progress? And could political headwinds derail the project before it even leaves the station? Let's dive into the next part, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any updates as we follow this project's journey across Colorado.
The fact is that Coloradans are more than ready for Front Range Rail.
Despite growing support at the state level, the Front Range Passenger Rail project faces significant political and financial headwinds. Earlier this month, GOP Representative Lauren Boebert publicly voiced her opposition to the project. In a letter addressed to Elon Musk, head of the Department of Government Efficiency, and Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy, she called for a federal inquiry and urged that any federal funding be withdrawn. If this is something Governor Polis wants to do, she stated, then have at it. Talk to the state legislature there, but the federal government has no business in that. So far, federal contributions to the project have been limited and sporadic. However, the Front Range Rail effort has managed to avoid the fate of several other projects that were defunded under the Trump administration. Notably, the Second Pennsylvanian and S-Line corridor projects saw their funding cut, and in early 2025, the proposed New York City to Scranton rail connection hit a major roadblock when a federal funding freeze halted discretionary infrastructure awards. That freeze left Pennsylvania's planning phase in limbo and sparked concerns that the entire project is now in serious jeopardy. In contrast, Colorado did receive a $66.4 million federal grant in October 2024 aimed at improving freight rail safety and expanding corridors northwest of Denver. While helpful, this funding falls far short of what's needed to break ground on the full passenger rail project. A spokesperson for Governor Polis emphasized the state's current position in a statement to CPR News. There are no federal funds planned for the construction of Front Range passenger rail, nor are we aware of the need for use of eminent domain. Do you think Colorado can pull this off? Comment 1 if you agree and 0 if you don't. Another headache for the Front Range passenger rail project, and honestly, for a lot of long-distance train routes across the U.S., is just getting the trains to run on time. Back on March 8, 2024, the first passenger train in decades made the trip from Denver to Longmont.
We were just on the very first Front Range passenger rail demonstration ride from Denver to Longmont.
It was a test run, and while it was exciting to see a train rolling again, the 44-mile ride took about 90 minutes. That's way slower than what they're aiming for once the line officially opens. Amtrak President Roger Harris called it a good start, but also admitted it shows just how much work is still ahead. Eventually, this line is supposed to connect Fort Collins to Pueblo, with stops in cities like Boulder, Longmont, Denver, and Colorado Springs. It's a huge project. Early estimates put the cost somewhere between $1.7 and $2.8 billion just for that core section. And if all goes according to plan, it might one day stretch even farther, reaching Cheyenne in the north and Trinidad in the south. The project recently made it to Step 2 of the Federal Corridor Identification and Development Program. That's great news. It means Washington is paying attention. But being on the list doesn't magically fix one of the most stubborn problems. The trains would have to share tracks with freight rail. And that's where things get messy. Most of Amtrak's routes here in the US run on tracks owned by big freight companies like BNSF and Union Pacific. So when there's a delay, whether it's a breakdown, maintenance work, or just a bunch of freight trains in the way, passenger trains often have to sit and wait. It's frustrating for riders, and it makes train travel feel unreliable compared to hopping in your car or booking a flight. And here's the kicker. A lot of these tracks were laid down back in the 1800s. Sure, they've been maintained for freight, but they weren't built for frequent, high-capacity passenger trains. Trying to upgrade them to do both isn't cheap, and it's not easy either. So, how does the public think about this project? Some folks are totally on board, saying it could be a hit, just like Utah's frontrunner. It would be a very successful state-supported Amtrak route, one person commented, pointing out that Colorado and Utah share a lot in terms of layout and travel needs. But even supporters admit it's not all smooth sailing. One big difference? Frontrunner has its own tracks, while this new Colorado line would have to share with freight trains run by BNSF and Union Pacific. That's a problem when it comes to delays and frequency. It's not going to be Frontrunner 2 right out of the gate, another user said. They also mentioned it's tough to add more tracks in some spots, and the current setup doesn't go straight into Union Station, something that would need a major upgrade. Not everyone's convinced. Some are worried about the price tag, bringing up past projects that didn't live up to expectations. One pointed to the light rail line to Golden, which cost over $700 million, but takes 3 times longer than just driving. Tens of billions of dollars later, and no one will ride it, they wrote. With traffic getting worse and the population booming, people need better ways to get around. That's why a train line connecting Fort Collins, Denver, and Pueblo makes a lot of sense. But it's not just about building tracks. It has to be fast, reliable, and actually useful if it's going to make a difference. If the state can pull that off, it could really change how Americans travel up and down the Front Range. Let's just hope it doesn't turn into another big idea that sounds great but never really happens.
Amtrak has been a vital part of American travel for decades, connecting cities and communities across the country. With ridership soaring and the need for rail travel increasing in a lot of regions that haven't been served by Amtrak, the need for an expansion is a must. However, it's not a piece of cake to complete this feat. Today, let's look at some problems that Amtrak is facing, as well as take a close look at all the current expansions that Amtrak is working on. Back when Amtrak was set up in 1970, they had a pretty clear way to get private railroads on board. Either hand over the passenger routes or keep running them yourself under orders from the Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC, until 1975. That mix of pressure and incentive helped Amtrak secure its early routes. The Passenger Service Act even gave the ICC backup power to deal with any railroads that didn't want to cooperate during future expansions. But things changed in 1976 when the 4R Act took that power away from the ICC. After that, Amtrak entered a rough patch with barely any new routes being added. It wasn't until 1996 that Congress stepped in again, realizing deregulation had gone too far. They created the Surface Transportation Board, STB, giving Amtrak a way to request access to new routes through a formal petition process. And in 2021, Amtrak released a bold and ambitious roadmap titled Amtrak Connects US, a vision to grow rail service across America. This wasn't just a promotional effort, it was a comprehensive national strategy aimed at expanding inner-city passenger rail to serve millions more Americans over the following 15 years. At its core, the plan envisioned 30 new routes and the enhancement of over 20 existing ones, with the ultimate goal of bringing rail service to over 160 new communities and adding 20 million more annual passengers by 2035. Still, that doesn't mean the process is easy, and even now, Amtrak continues to face major hurdles in this area. So, what challenges are they dealing with today? We'll dive into that in the next part. But before we do, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any updates from our channel about the world of trains. Most people don't realize this, but over 70% of the tracks Amtrak runs on aren't even owned by Amtrak. They belong to big freight companies like Union Pacific, BNSF, and CSX, and that means Amtrak trains often have to wait around while slower freight trains get the green light. Even though there's a law that says passenger trains are supposed to get priority, it's not really enforced, and Amtrak ends up playing second fiddle more often than not. The delays are no joke. In 2024 alone, freight train interference caused more than 850,000 minutes of delays. That's over 590 days of people sitting and waiting just in 1 year. And it's not just a once-in-a-while thing, it's constant, especially on longer cross-country routes. One really bad example happened in 2022, when the Sunset Limited got held up 29 times in one trip because of freight traffic. That single ride ended up running 12 hours late. That kind of stuff makes it tough for people to take Amtrak seriously as a reliable way to travel. If the train's always late, it's hard to choose it over driving or flying, especially when it already takes longer. So, what's being done about it? Amtrak's trying a few different things. One is working out better schedules with the freight railroads. Sounds simple, but it's not. These companies are focused on shipping cargo, not moving passengers, so they're not exactly eager to make changes. Another big part of the problem, one of the most pressing issues, is the poor and aging infrastructure that underpins much of the existing rail system. Many key routes, especially in the Midwest and West, still rely on freight-owned tracks that were never designed for frequent or fast passenger service. These tracks are often subject to delays, lack modern signaling systems, and have outdated bridges and tunnels, some over a century old. Some of the rail infrastructure is really old. Take the B&P tunnel in Baltimore. It's been in use for more than 150 years. It's small, outdated, and slows everything down. Combine that with sharing tracks with slow-moving freight trains, and it causes major backups, especially on busy routes like the Northeast Corridor. Now for the good news, Amtrak's starting to fix things. They're finally replacing the ancient B&P tunnel with a brand new one, the Frederick Douglass Tunnel. It'll have 2 modern tubes and handle both Amtrak and MARC trains. When it's done, trains will move faster and more reliably through Baltimore. In New Jersey, they're rebuilding the Sawtooth Bridges, which are more than a century old. Once that's finished, it'll double the number of daily trains and help out both Amtrak and NJ Transit. Over at New York Penn Station, they're planning to double train capacity, from 24 to 48 trains per hour. That's a big jump for one of the busiest stations in the country. And they're not stopping there. Amtrak's also working on upgrades across the board, installing new signals, overhead wires, and other tech to cut down on delays. One example is the Keystone Corridor between Philly and Harrisburg, where they're modernizing the system to make service smoother and more reliable. Even more exciting, Amtrak is looking to buy and build completely new passenger-only routes, especially in parts of the country that barely have train service today. That means better connections for more cities, and a step toward finally bringing America's rail network into the modern era. Let's be real, Amtrak doesn't survive on ticket sales alone. Ticket revenue typically covers only half or less of Amtrak's total operating and capital costs. The rest? It comes from federal and state governments, which provide the critical funding needed to keep trains running, maintain infrastructure, and support service expansion across the country. Historically, Amtrak's funding was unstable. Before 2015, most support came through year-to-year congressional appropriations, which made it nearly impossible to plan big infrastructure upgrades. That meant deferred maintenance, aging equipment, and outdated stations across the country. Things began to shift with the FAST Act of 2015, the first time Amtrak was included in a multi-year surface transportation bill. This provided more reliable funding and kicked off a new era of planning stability. A major turning point for rail funding came in 2021 with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, which allocated $66 billion for passenger rail, the largest federal rail investment since Amtrak's founding. This funding supports both the Northeast Corridor and underserved regions nationwide. In 2024, Amtrak also secured $126 million in CRISI grants for safety and infrastructure upgrades across several states. Meanwhile, programs like the Federal-State Partnership are driving critical NEC projects like the Portal North Bridge and the Gateway Program. States remain essential partners. California funds the Pacific Surfliner, while Washington and Oregon back the Cascades, ensuring key regional services continue to grow. Still, the system remains politically vulnerable. In 2025, the Trump administration launched a review of rail grants, which could delay or block key projects, like a proposed second daily train between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. Further, under federal law, Amtrak requires states to share the cost of operating certain services that are under 750 miles in length. While some states have embraced this model and invested heavily, others have struggled to maintain consistent support. The Heartland Flyer highlights the funding challenges facing Amtrak's national network. The Heartland Flyer, linking Oklahoma City and Fort Worth, relies on annual state funding from Oklahoma and Texas. While Texas has remained supportive, Oklahoma has often debated its contribution, putting the route at risk. Proposals to extend service north to Kansas or south to Austin have stalled, largely due to the lack of multi-state funding agreements and long-term commitments. These cases show that without reliable state partnerships, even federally supported routes struggle to grow or survive. That kind of political effect makes it difficult for Amtrak and individual states to commit to long-term expansion plans. With all these upgrades underway, Amtrak is aiming to meet the growing demands of its passengers. But will it be enough? Drop a 1 if you think it's on the right track, or 0 if you're not convinced. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Amtrak isn't just adding more trains, aiming for a full upgrade, a cleaner, smarter, and more sustainable rail system that can meet the demands of the 21st century. And that means tapping into technologies already shaping rail networks around the world. One of the biggest changes ahead is the move from diesel to electric power. Right now, most of Amtrak's long-distance routes still run on diesel locomotives. They're loud, expensive to maintain, and they burn a lot of fuel. Switching to electric trains helps Amtrak cut emissions, reduce noise, and lower costs, while supporting U.S. climate goals. Countries like France, Japan, and China have already made this shift. For example, nearly all of France's high-speed TGV network runs on electric power, much of it from low-carbon energy sources. Amtrak is already running electric trains like the Acela on the Northeast Corridor, but expanding electrification beyond that region is a key long-term target. Beyond running cleaner trains, Amtrak is investing in greener infrastructure. That includes solar panels at maintenance facilities, energy-efficient lighting and HVAC systems in new stations, and the use of eco-friendly materials in construction. Some of these stations are now aiming for LEED certification, a mark of sustainability in building design. You can already see this shift at major hubs. In New York, the new Moynihan Train Hall features sustainable materials and improved natural lighting. On the West Coast, the modernization of Los Angeles Union Station includes energy upgrades that reduce emissions while preserving historic architecture. That's a wrap for today. Thanks for joining us on Great Train Speed. Hope you enjoyed the ride. See you in the next episode.